Hi, thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to give you a heads up really quickly about what we're going to be covering in this class. Okay, so when you signed up for the class, you were given a series of images in a link on Dropbox. We are going to be going through those images 1 through 8 in order. With the first one, I'm going to start talking about how I enhance my images, how I use curves and layers and dodge and burn and all these different things to really make your images magical. With the second image, I'm going to show you how to take things out of the background. With images 3A and 3B, I'm going to show you how to do head swaps. It's very easy, but they're both image 3. With image 4, I'm going to teach you how to use a sky overlay. It's very simple. Photoshop has made this really easy. You won't have this particular feature if you don't have Lightroom 2021 or later, so just to give you a heads up on that. Okay, and then with images 5, 6, and 7, I'm going to show you how to do different types of overlays. We're going to be doing a snow overlay, a light flare overlay, and a bird overlay, so I'll teach you how to make those look realistic and really enhance your photos. And then with image 8, I'm going to show you how to change the color of things in Lightroom. Unfortunately, with this recording, the live Q&A cut off. I don't know what happened, but it's not on there. So if you have any questions, I will try to answer them as I voice through all of this. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, send me a text or an email or an Instagram DM or whatever you want to get in touch, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get started. Okay, welcome to Photoshop. We're gonna just dive right in here. So I am working with image number 1. You have access to this image in that link that I sent you. So if you want to edit along with me, you're totally welcome to. If you don't want to, you can just watch and then practice on your own photos. So I've got this image open here. Let me first show you really quickly what layers are and what curves are, and then I'm going to show you how I would enhance this image. So knowing what layers and curves are is very useful. It's really important, and it's going to really help you with a lot of other things as we move along this class. So if you come over here, first of all, your Lightroom might look a little bit different than mine. If you look a little bit different, that's totally okay. You can move everything around in here, and so I've kind of adjusted things in my version so that I have what I use the most easy access right here. But I've got my layers here. Layers might be down at the bottom for you. Right here I've got the history, so this is like undo, so you can see everything you've done. And then right here is properties, and that's gonna come up every time we use a different tool. So that's useful. These are all my tools. They might be on the other side for you. Yeah, that's basically all you need to know. Everything up here is how you like the brush sizes, opacity, things like that. Okay, so let's talk about layers first. If I come over here to this circle with the line through it right here and click on this, let's just, I'm going to demonstrate what layers do first, okay? So I'm going to add a solid color to this photo. Let's make it red just to make it really obvious. Now, if I hide that layer right there, you can see the background layer, this original photo. But when I make this layer visible, we can see only the red. That is because of this little box right here. So this red is what you see. This little box is called a layer mask, and a layer mask either makes things visible or hidden. So if it's a white layer mask, this layer is going to be visible. And if it is a black layer mask, it's going to be invisible. Okay, it's hidden. That black hides the layer. So here's where that gets useful. If I use my paintbrush, remember, white makes it visible. So if I use a white paintbrush directly onto my photo, look what it does. That makes that layer mask visible because I put white there. Now, if I were to switch it and bring it back to black, then I can hide that layer mask again. Now, you probably wouldn't come to this image and want to put red on top of it, but you could do this if you, let's say I wanted I don't know, obviously this is just an example, but let's say I wanted some red in the background, some red color. So I could just turn my opacity way down low, and I could draw on, as long as my brush is white, which it wasn't, I could add some red color to that. Or I could add, red water to it. Or I could zoom in and I could make his hat red. Like this. Bring my opacity up a little bit. Okay, so what you need to remember for layer masks is that black hides the layer and white makes it visible, both with your paintbrush colors and the mask itself. So if you hide the mask with black, then you need a white paintbrush to make it visible. And if you want it to be completely visible, which we will later, you'll see, you're going to leave it white and use black to erase some of that off. So that is how layer masks work and layers. Let me show you how curves work. So if I click again on this circle and then come down to curves, I'm going to get this line. If I pull the curve up, it's going to brighten my image. If I pull the curve down, it's going to darken my image. If I grab the top, it's going to neutralize my highlights. Do you see that? All the highlights in my photo will kind of soften. And if I pull the bottom up, it will neutralize the shadow, soften the shadow. Now the ideal shape of a curve is going to be an S shape. So this curve can be kind of a one-stop shop in editing. If you just need a quick pop to your photo, you can just make a little S curve. A little bit here on the top quarter, a little bit down on the bottom quarter. Soften those shadows, soften those highlights. I've made the shape of an S and it's made a really big impact. Let me show you. If I take away, make that not visible anymore, or I could make it visible. Now, you could use this. Let's say I wanted it really dramatic like this. Now, let's think about what we just learned with curves or with layer masks. I'm going to hide that layer. I'm going to use my paintbrush in white. I'm going to make my brush really big. And then I'm going to maybe put my opacity down at like 50%. Now watch. We've got that cool shaped curve, right? So I could come in here with that curve and I could just add the effects of that curve to like my bushes. And I kind of pulled the bottom corner of that curve. Look, we can review it. Remember how I pulled this part up? So it's making those shadows really soft, kind of giving it a vintagey look. But if I were to adjust it, it's only going to affect the parts of that layer mask that I've made white, that I've made visible. Okay? So that can also be a very, very useful way to edit your photos and enhance them. Okay, now I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go back to the beginning. So that's why I like to use the history tab a lot, because you can just scroll up to where you started. Now I'm going to show you how to do dodge and burn. So with dodge and burn, you want to imagine that you're burning wood. When you burn wood, if you've ever used I don't know, do they use a little torch for that or something? When you burn wood, it turns dark. But if you dodge areas, they'll stay light. So that is the same way the dodge and burn tools work, except our dodge tool, instead of just keeping it as light as it is, will lighten it more. So you're going to find the dodge and burn tools right here. It kind of looks like a magnifying glass or like a lollipop or something. That's going to be your dodge tool. Let me show you how it works. If you right click, you'll find the burn tool there as well. But we're going to stay on dodge tool first. I never use it at 100%, but I just want to show you what it does. So if I put my dodge tool at 100%, watch how it affects my photo. Do you see how it just makes it super bright? And it's very, very buildable. Now, I wouldn't ever want to do that, but you can probably start to see where that could actually be a pretty useful tool, right? Okay, let me show you what the burn tool does. We'll come down here, right click on the lollipop. You're going to click on this one. I think it looks like a fist kind of, but I don't know what it's supposed to be. Let's put this one at 100%. And what does it do? It darkens. Now with both the dodge and the burn tools, The dodge tool will lighten the light parts faster, the burn tool will darken the dark parts faster, but it will do everything. But like if you watch right here, see these two dark spots and then the lighter bushes? If I just brush over that, see how it made the darker parts significantly darker. They're almost black now, and this just kind of darkened up. So that's how that works. Okay, now let me show you, I'm going to use the dodge and burn tool, but you could definitely do this with curves and masks as well, but it's a little bit simpler with dodge and burn. So this is kind of the basic edit that I always do. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring my exposure down to around 25 to 30%. I don't like it really too heavy because it's buildable, so I like to start with it kind of low. And then I always start with the burn tool. I like to darken first and then lighten second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my burn tool anywhere that there's shadow. See the shadow right here? If I come along here and I kind of emphasize that shadow a little bit, I've got some shadows here, I've got a little bit along the bank there, I've got some darker areas here. These feel dark enough to me, but like maybe a little bit right there, maybe some right here to just deepen that. My goal here is to add depth to my photos. I usually like to do at least one side in kind of the front corner. And then I'm going to add a little bit more to my river. And then I'm going to zoom in on him. So then I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and I'm just going to grab those folds in his clothing, those shadows where the clothing folds. That's going to give it kind of a little bit more magical, a little bit surreal look to it. You want to be careful to not do too much dodge and burn on skin because it can affect it a lot, but I will just kind of emphasize just a little. Come out here, make sure that it's there. And then I like to add a little bit of shadow underneath my subject so that, because there always is, there's always actually shadow there. Okay, so let's look at the original image and then just using the burn tool. Huge difference, right? Okay, I'm going to come back to the burn tool. We're going to right click and we're going to pull in the dodge tool. Again, I just want it at about 25 to 30%. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger of a brush. And I'm going to come in here and lighten the lighter parts. I really love doing this on the tops of bushes or the tops of trees. I think that's a really pretty place to add some lightness. I often will like lighten up water a little bit. I know that I just did some darkness, but I'm kind of trying to avoid some of those darker areas that I did. This part of the pathway is kind of light, and that could be a good place to add some contrast right there. Good. And I'm not going to do too much on him because his outfit's pretty light anyway. But I'm just going to do a little bit right there to kind of emphasize his little cheeks. And I could just do like a little bit where it's light on his clothing. Okay, so let me show you the dodge tool before we dodged, after we dodged. Okay, so we've got some really good contrast now. Now, the last thing that I do to kind of add to like a magical look is I'm going to use this dropper tool. It works just like in paint back in the day, you know. You're just going to click and hold and pick a color. I'm going to start with green, so I picked kind of a soft, neutrally green that I liked. I'm going to use my paintbrush, just my normal paintbrush. I'm going to bring it down under 10%. And then I'm going to make sure it's nice and big. I am going to just paint a little bit of green into those bushes. Okay, I'm not doing a lot, just like a light layer. If I get too heavy-handed with this, it'll become very obvious that I have, okay? But I just want a little bit of a softness. Do you see how that's kind of softened things up? Let me show you before we did that. Here's before we did it. And it hasn't just evened things out. It has a little bit because we put some all over color on it, but it's also just kind of made it look dreamy and almost like a painting. So
Now I'm going to do some brown. I'm going to grab the brown spots and just do a little bit of that here. Again, just barely. I don't want anybody to look at it and be like, oh, she was painting. Like, I want it to look like a real photo. So that's what I'm going to do. You could even, like, if I wanted this water to be a little more blue, I'm going to look for, there's a little bit of bluishness in the, it's probably garbage, but I could always paint a little bit of blue into there to give a little bit of extra color if I wanted. And then, once I'm done adding that extra painted color, I typically, make sure you keep these black and white when you're doing anything else besides just painting with color. I typically will go back in with my dodge tool and just add just a smidge more contrast. A little bit more darkness since I kind of evened everything out a lot. I'm just going to add a little bit more, but it's going to maintain that kind of watercolor look, that, you know, softness to it. And I'll just add just a smidge, and that's probably good. So I'm going to slide up here and show you the original. There's the other original photo, which was really cute and really good. But by doing some of this, it just really takes it to the next level, doesn't it? So the last thing that I might do is sharpen. This triangle right here is a sharpening tool. I would never do it over 50%. There's actually a lot of debate in the photography community about whether people should even be sharpening in Photoshop. A lot of people don't like it. If you do, only do the outline of your subject and don't do it very harsh. Just enough, because look what will happen if I do very much of it. If I just go back and forth on this, do you see how that made it like crispy and crusty and pixely and nasty? We do not want that. So if you do just one swipe only on the outline, don't go all the way in on your clothes, just the outline of your subject to make it just kind of look like you really nailed your focus. And then I like to go right along the ground where my subject's sitting, because again, that gives this illusion that you really nailed that focus. Okay, so that is what I would do with image number 1. Okay, let's go to image number 2. So for image number 2, we're going to use this one, and we are going to, I'm going to show you how to take stuff out of the background. So in this location, if you've ever been here, you know it's just like bonkers. It's so busy, and so I really wanted to show you guys just quickly what I would do. So we're just going to take this car out. I'm not going to take the time to do everything, but it's the same concept for everything. The number one thing, let's see, I am going to use the clone tool. That's this stamp right here. Every time I remove something from the background. I think it works a lot better than any of like the smart tools that Photoshop has designed to do this. I don't know. I just like it that way. So let me show you the number one no-no when you are photoshopping something out of the background, and that is to have a repeating pattern. So I don't know why you'd want to do this, but let's say that I wanted more branches. I would never, ever, ever want to do this, because in nature, are we ever going to have the exact same clumps of flowers over and over? Absolutely not. That would never naturally occur in nature. That will never look natural, and that's going to be a very obvious sign that you photoshopped. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we spread things out, use pieces from other places, and make sure we don't have any repeating patterns. Now let me show you how the clone tool works. So when you click on the clone tool, you want it at 100%, and you want just whatever size feels comfortable to you. I usually like to keep it about 1/4 of the size of what I'm working with. So in this situation, like this size to do that is probably a good size. Then what you're going to do is you're going to push Alt, and it's going to make that clone disappear, and then you're going to click somewhere. So let's say I just clicked right here. Then that means your clone tool is anchored right there. You can move anywhere else in the photo and that will show up. Okay? So that makes it really simple. We're just cloning things from one place to another. Let me show you the other trick. So in order to avoid having repeating patterns like this, you know, in order to avoid that, because that's not what we want, what you're going to do is you're going to anchor, you're going to go to where you want it, then you're going to click and hold as you draw. Because as long as you're holding, it will just continue to clone everything around. Okay, but if you let go, guess what? It's just going to go right back to the same thing. So let's take a look at this section now. So if you see right here, you see how the road continues behind this tree? So we want to make sure that we keep the road there, because it wouldn't make sense for it to be here but not here. That will confuse you, people who are looking at your image a little bit. Okay, so we're going to get the clone tool. We're going to make it a little smaller. This is a good size. And then I want to clone this road, and I like that grass, and I like how it comes up into here. I'm going to clone that directly over to here. Okay, so let's anchor it. I'm putting the anchor right in the middle of the sidewalk and the grass, so that I can then come line it up over here. And then we're just going to click and hold and start drawing. Okay, and we're going to draw until we feel like we're good. Okay, now if I scoot back, the only thing that maybe feels a little bit repeating to me is these guys right there. So if that's bothering you, use the clone tool, maybe come to a different area with the same colors and click right there, or even better yet, bring this down to like 65% and then draw over that, because that will add just a little bit. Since those are faded anyway, you would never want to do like somebody's face at that percentage because it doesn't bring it in all the way. But we just need a little bit of that color and texture to be over here to get rid of that repeating pattern, right? And then that looks really good. Okay, so let's get rid of this other piece of the car here now. Put it back up to 100%. I'm going to bring my brush down a little bit more just to make sure that it's a good fit. Now, see how we've got a tree here, and this is up against the tree. If we just start in the middle of somewhere, there's a good chance that I'll have some kind of faded edges on that tree, and it will make it look a little funny. One trick that I like to use is I will put the side of my brush kind of right up against a tree of the same color, and then I'll start about that distance away. And then if I do a little overlapping, hold on, let me show you again. Then if I overlap a little bit, it's okay because I've got that brown tree that's cloning in. You see that? So it leaves a sharper line. And that is all I would do to get rid of that car. So here's the before and the after, nice and easy. Just make sure you don't have anything repeating. You would do the same thing for anything over here you wanted to get rid of. Okay, perfect. All right, let's move on to image 3. So for image 3, we have 2 of them. Oh, let me grab one other. Okay, so in this situation, we're going to pretend that mom really loves this photo, except little brother's not looking. So we're going to take him from this photo and move him over onto this one. Okay, let me tell you the secrets to face swapping. You honestly cannot make a face swap look flawless unless you have the same angle, the same pose, the same lighting. So it's not even a matter of finding a photo of him smiling nicely in this one from any part of the shoot, because if I'm closer, if I'm further back, if I'm higher, if I'm lower, if the light is different, if he's standing at a different angle, all of those things are going to make it look wrong when you put it onto this photo. So people think that head swaps are like this really magical thing, and they are, but it has to be from the same set of images with the same pose to really make it feasible. You have to be really a Photoshop guru to do anything different, and I'm not. I've done it on occasion, but I've never been happy with the results if it's not from the same pose. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use this lasso tool right here, and we're just going to make a nice wide circle around him. I'm okay with some of her hands in there, some of his sweater, some of her hair and her outfit. We're just going to draw a circle around him like this, and then we're going to grab our move tool, and I'm going to Control C to copy, and then we're going to come to this one and Control V. Now as long as you have the move tool selected, you'll be able to slide him over. We'll just kind of get an approximate idea of where he goes, and then I'm going to come right here on layers. See how that made a second layer? When I pasted him on there, it made a new layer automatically. So I'm going to make that layer 50% opacity, and I'm going to line up. What I'm looking at right now is basically his sweater. His head is a little bit in a different place, but his sweater looks like his body stayed about the same. It was just his head that was moving. So I'm going to line up his sweater there, and then I'm going to put it back at 100%. I'm going to click on layer 1, and I'm going to come right here to this little icon that looks like a camera just under layers. That's going to add a layer mask. Now this is an example of when I want my layer mask to be white, because I want to be able to see what the finished product is going to look like. If I turned it black, I can't see it. And I would be able to, let me show you, if I used the white paint, I could draw him in there, but I don't exactly know where he's coming, where he's going to be and things like that. So it's a lot easier to keep it white and have a black paintbrush, which will mean I can see that whole layer, but using the black paintbrush, I'm hiding some of that layer and pulling so it'll see the background, the original background. All I'm going to do now is, using a black paintbrush, I'm just going to start erasing off some of that top layer. And I'm going to make sure that I don't leave any weird outlines or like a wonky finger. Like we don't want like her to have 6 fingers or something like that, right? We're just going to start erasing. This is why it's important that his sweater kind of matched, because I can just bring it all, I can blend into this sweater a little bit, but if I go too far, see how now I've got like 2 parts of his neck? Just switch back to white, make my brush a little smaller, and erase that right off. And that'll make that top layer visible again. Okay, so we'll come back to black. I want to make sure I don't miss any parts of her arm, her hands. Oh, I'm undoing what I just did. Here we go. I don't want to miss anything. Oh, I've got some of his ear, so again, some of his hair from underneath. So again, we're going to want to work on that. I'm going to come in there and then switch it back to white so that I can erase his cute little ear and his hair. And it is simple as that. That's all you're going to do. So you can get really detailed, going back and forth between white and black to make it visible or invisible, but that's all I would do. So here's the before, and there is the after. Okay? All right, let's move on to image 4. Okay, so image number 4, we're going to use this one, and we're going to change the sky. So there's a very simple way to do this. Photoshop has recently allowed for it. I'm clicking up here on edit. I actually think it's just off your screen, but I'm just clicking the edit drop down menu, and I'm choosing sky replacement. Now, these mountains are going to be too light. Let me show you. I already know that that's not going to work, but let me show you why, and I'll show you how to fix it. See how they just look so fake with the, if the sky was like this, there would be more shadow on these mountains. So I'll show you how to use that in a second, but we're going to just use our burn tool. We're going to bring it down to a little bit smaller size, maybe like 550. And then I'm just going to come over these mountains. I'm going to go right over my subjects. I don't mind if I go over them because they're silhouettes anyway. And we're just going to get some of that And then we'll add a little bit to the ground so it kind of blends, and we could use a little bit of the dodge tool if we wanted to light, oh, not the mountains, but just kind of that foreground. Okay, that might look a little funky right now, but trust me, it's gonna help. So, go to Edit, drop down to Sky Replacement. Here's how this tool works. So, it's gonna take just a second to detect where your sky borders are. And then, see how much better those mountains look? Then, here's how you use it. So, if I drop down here, you will probably have, I think these top 3 are the ones that come with Photoshop. You can buy light sky overlays on Etsy or anywhere else and download them to your sky replacement, and it'll totally work. But you can just start clicking on other skies and see what you like. What you're going to want to do with a sky replacement to make sure that it works is you've got to make sure that it's the right kind of lighting. So I'm recording, just give me 1 minute. So clearly with lighting like this, where they're backlit and there's a halo around them and it's so warm, a blue sky is not right. It doesn't look good. Neither does a cloudy sky, right? There's obviously sun in this photo. So I'm going to use, and I really like this sunset for this shot because it kind of works with all the other colors, right? It works with the sky, with the lighting, all those kinds of things. However, I need you to remember you cannot use a sunset image if your subjects are not backlit, because if you are seeing the sunset, the sun is behind your subject. So do not ever use a sunset overlay if your light is anywhere except behind your subjects. If your light was facing the subjects, you would not be seeing a sunset. You'd probably be seeing blue skies. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to that. Okay, here's what we're going to do to kind of blend this more seamlessly and make it look like it really could have been the sky. So the first one is Shift Edge. If I pull this all the way up, it's gonna try to get really detailed. The only time I'd want to pull it up really high is if like I had a tree with a lot of leaves or something where I wanted it to get really in detail. It's normally at 0 when you start. I usually bring it down to about like -10 to -15. If I bring it down, it's just gonna like fade that so it's not as intense. I like to bring it down just a little so that it's not such a harsh line. Okay, so we'll go like -14. Then the next one is Fade Edge. It starts at 50. If I bring it all the way up, it'll really fade that, so it really kind of blends it out. If I bring it all the way down, it will make it very sharp and crisp. Okay, usually around 50 is good for me. I might bring it up just a smidge, just to kind of soften that line. Brightness, of course, will brighten your sky or darken your sky. I don't usually mess with that. Oh, shoot. I just accidentally canceled out of it. Okay, so it's going to detect again. We've already got the sky we like. We put the Shift Edge down to about -15 and the Fade Edge up to about 5 or 6. Okay, so that's what brightness does. Temperature will warm it up or cool it off. For this one, it's fine where it is. I might warm it up just a smidge, but not much. Scale will make your sky bigger or smaller. Okay. Oops. We're going to put it at 100. I usually keep it right at 100 or just above, like between 100 and 105. Now, this little flip tool is really great. See how my sun is definitely coming from like this area in this photo, but in the photo that I took, the sun is over here. So if I just check the flip box, it'll switch the sky's direction, and that makes a lot more sense to have the darker parts of the sky on this side and the lighter parts over here, just with the way that I shot this photo. Okay, and then these last ones, this might be closed, but the foreground adjustments, This is really cool because these 3 adjustments adjust like the lighting and colors of your image to match what the lighting would be if this was really the sky. So you don't need to do too much of this, but you can see this foreground lighting. If I pull it all the way up, it does this. All the way down, it lightens it up more. The edge lighting, that's going to come right along here on the edge of it. Darken, lighten. In this situation, I kind of like it a little bit darker to kind of do that with the mountains, but then I'm going to lighten this part just to soften that up just a smidge. And then color adjustment, this is not going to do very much on this photo because I had the colors pretty much right, but this would adjust like here if I were to mess with it. Okay, so once you're happy with the way it looks, you're going to push OK. Now, again, we're going to be using layers to make this work. So in this little folder, I've got everything that I just did to my photo. So the sky, all the blending, all the colors that were added, all that stuff is all here. I'm going to click right on this sky. So if I zoom in, I can see some details on my mountains because of the lens that I used, but they're not as crisp as these, like crisp and strong as these clouds look. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm going to come up here to filter. Again, I don't think you can see it, but I'm doing the filter drop down menu, coming to blur, and then coming to Gaussian blur. The reason that I'm doing that is because if I've got this sky selected, it will blur out just that sky. Now, I don't want it, I of course don't want it this blurred because that doesn't make sense. That's not what that sky would really look like, right? But when it's not blurred at all, it just like the clouds are much further away than the mountains are, but they look more in focus, which doesn't make a lot of sense to the eye either. I do want some focus, so I might try around like close to 10. That blurs them a little bit, but not so much that it feels like unnatural. Does that make sense? So if I had a really blurred background, I would end up blurring a lot more. But for now, I'm just going to put it at about here. And then the other thing you can do if you feel like the colors are a little too intense, with this still selected, you can come over here to opacity. And if I brought it all the way down, it would get rid of that sky completely. All the way up is 100%. I could bring that down a little bit if I wanted less of the sky in it. In this case, I like it all the way up, but you might not want quite so much. And that's it. That's how I would do a sky overlay. So here's this, here's without, and then here's the finished product. Okay? All right, now we are going to talk about overlays. Okay, let's move on to the other overlay options. So the first ones we're going to do are, we're going to do this one and we're going to do it with this bird overlay. Okay, let me actually minimize that. So we're going to just pop that in there and I'll show you how we're going to do it. So I'm in this window, but both the photo and the overlay are anchored up here. I'm just going to, while in this one, I'm going to drag this over in on top. Okay, so now I can see both windows. Make sure you've got the move tool. Do you see how the background of this is checkered? That means it's empty. There's not anything in there. The image only consists of the solid birds. So if that background is empty, make sure you grab something solid, like the bird, and you're just going to grab it and drag straight over onto her. Okay? Then I can just bring that overlay back up here to the top and anchor it so it's still there but out of the way. Now, when I drag that over, it created its own layer. So of course, we know what we're going to do with that. We're going to use layer masks and things. So when I've dragged it over, I'm going to click outside. If I want to click on them again, I can click on them or click on layer. At that point, I can just move them around and adjust them any way that I'd like to. So if I want them bigger, smaller, whatever I want to do. So let's say I want to put them here. Maybe just make them a smidge smaller. Okay. Now, just from looking at this, you can already see, I'm sure, what's wrong with this and why they look fake. It's because if they were really flying this far away from my subject, so they were, maybe back here or something, as far as like the horizon, that far away, they would not be in focus, would they? So we're going to click on that layer. Look, I fixed it so you can see this. Come up here to filter and come back down to blur and Gaussian blur again. That's my favorite type of blur. And then as you slide this around, you can see, so if I do it up too high, they totally disappear. Down at the bottom, they're not blurred at all. I'm just going to adjust this until they feel about as blurred as they really would in real life. So now I know that that looks like a lot, but because they're so detailed and they have the dark and the light and all that stuff, it's definitely, even when they're really blurred, it's definitely still really packing a punch in my photos. In this photo, it's really like, but they look like they were really there. They look like this was a really lucky moment where I got them in focus, but some birds just happened to fly into my shot. We know that those are birds. We don't need to see the detail of their feathers, right? It makes sense that they would be that blurred. So that's what I would do to add something like that to my background without having it be obvious that it's fake, okay? Now, if I wanted to take one of these birds out, let's say, I don't know, let's say this little one-winged guy is bugging me. We're going to click on layer, click on the little camera icon, the layer mask. I want the layer to be visible, so it's going to be white. And I'm going to use a black paintbrush and increase the size just a little. And I could just paint him right off. If I change my mind, maybe I'm taking this guy off too. If I change my mind about those guys, switch it back to white, paint them back on, and there we go. Okay, easy, easy, easy. Let's go to the next one. This one is image 6. It goes with overlay 2. And for this shot, we're going to do exactly the same thing we just did. So we've got the image here, the overlay here. We're going to make sure we have the move tool selected because that makes it easy. Then we're going to drag this overlay over here so both windows are open next to each other. Now, do you notice how this one does not have any of that checkered look to the background? That's because this entire image is a full image. It's not see-through in the back. So let me show you how to make it see-through in the back. We're going to drag it on and we're going to anchor this back up. Now, when we set that over, that's obviously not going to work. If I bring the opacity down, I can still see the blackness in it. Even if I were to adjust it, let's say I made it just the right size and everything, that doesn't look good, right? That's not going to work. So we're going to leave the opacity where it was. What you're going to do is, while this layer is selected, come to this drop-down menu, the one that says normal. Drop down. This is going to affect how your layer appears. We're going to go to screen. You see, when I go to screen, it gets rid of everything that's black. It only leaves the other colors. Some of the other ones do different things. Some of them affect the color of your photo. Some of them only erase certain colors. Some of them kind of invert things. Screen is going to be the one you want if your overlay has a black background. So I'm going to click on that. At that point, I could move this around any way I wanted to. Again, now you know layer masks, so if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to get rid of the snowflake off his little face, make sure I'm painting with black, I could just erase that right off of there, or right off of her. Okay? And vice versa. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, last one. Now we're going to go with image 7 and overlay 3. This is a sun flare overlay, and I use these all the stinking time. But again, just like the sky overlay when we talked about that, you want to make sure you're only using this appropriately. So I would not have sun flare coming into my camera if the sun was not that direction behind my subject, right? The sun would have to be over here to be coming into my camera. Now it works with this image because look, he's got haloing all the way around him. Clearly, The sun wasn't coming from over here. That's where he's dark and shadowed. The sun was coming from over here. So it's very feasible when you look at the lighting of this image on my subject that I could be standing, like, who knows how tall this boulder is, right? I could be standing just outside of the shade of that boulder and be getting some sun flare into my camera without it quite, while he's still in the shade. So let's do the same thing. We're going to drag that overlay over. It's got a black background, not a see-through one, so we're going to drag it on top. And then we're going to make sure that layer is selected, and we're going to go to screen. Then we can move it around. So I kind of like it right here. I think it fits nicely with that little crease. You could also do it up here. You could do it down here in this corner. You could do it in a lot of places, but look, it doesn't make sense right here, right? Because there's no light on his face. There's no way. A sun flare would be coming from there and lighting his, it would be lighting him up. So it has to be on this side where we've got that lighter light on him. I'm just going to put it right there. Click outside, and there you go. Hold on, I'm going to adjust that just a smidge. Maybe a teeny bit more. There. I really like how that looks. You can totally play around with that. Sometimes I'll add multiple overlays into the same image. This sunflare overlay on that one where we adjusted the sky could have looked really pretty. In fact, let me just show you really fast. Let's do a sky overlay right here and add a little bit of color. Let's see if it can detect that this is the sky. It's not always perfect at it, so we'll just see. It's a little confused. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I could leave this color in there. I'm gonna do those same things that I did before. Probably just those two. I think I'm good with that. Let's see what we look like if we flip it. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, let's push an OK here. I'm gonna put a Gaussian blur over this because my background is pretty blurred. Like, by the time you get to these rocks, they're pretty blurred out. So it would only make sense that this sky was also blurred, and we're mostly just seeing color, right? Okay, now let's drag that overlay in here. Pop it in on top. And look at how many layers we've got going on. I'm going to hide that sky replacement layer so it's not so messy, but that's all there. Make sure you've got this layer selected. Click on screen. Pop that over there. Make that a little bit smaller for this one. And there we go. So that could add, like that added a lot of punch to have this like this. I probably should have adjusted those edges a little bit more than I did, but you get the idea how that can, multiple layers can be built on top of each other. Let's go a little further. Let's click on the background. Let's use our burn tool. And let's burn in some of those shadows. Okay. I don't need too much shadow in here. I want to zoom in a little bit and get his little folds on his clothes, right under his feet, stuff like that. Okay. And then let's get our dodge tool here. I'm going to make it big at first. I'm going to just dodge some lighter areas. Let's grab the top of this. And then let's maybe just do a little bit of color in here. We're going to put it all together. Why not? Put this down. I'm going to add a little bit of that color to this. Just kind of smooth everything out of it all. Good. Okay, you guys, let's look at the before and after. So, here is the original image, and check out that after. Pretty dang cool. some pretty impressive adjustments. Okay, we have one more thing. We're going to just change colors. I'm going to show you how to change the color of one thing, one element in Photoshop, and then we are going to be done. So let's head over and do that. Okay, let's grab that last image here. And we're just going to go into this briefly. This can get a little bit complicated. I'm going to keep just to the basics, keep it really simple for you. So we are going to change the color of her jacket. What you're going to do is you're going to zoom in nice and close so her jacket kind of fills your screen. And then you're going to come right here. This one actually might show up for you as this box with the arrow, but if you right click, we're going to use the quick selection tool. Okay, make sure that you're on the plus up here, and it can be pretty tiny, and then you're just going to start kind of tracing around the areas that you want to change. It's going to try to predict what you want. It's totally okay if it gets some things wrong, because we can adjust it, and I'll show you how. So I'm just going to get as much of her jacket as I can. Okay, so it's got pretty much her whole jacket outlined, if you notice, but it also has her hands and this the wagon pulley thing in it as well. So we're going to come in here, zoom in a little closer, and I'm going to try to get it off of her hands by using the minus brush right here. Okay, we'll take it off of there. Then we're going to keep, I'm going to keep the minus brush actually, and just get rid of that background behind her jacket because we don't want that. Okay, now we're going to go back to the plus brush, and we are just going to try to make sure we get as much of the jacket in here as we can. Now once we change the color, this can also be adjusted, and I'll show you how, but we want to get as close as we can get. Oops. Okay, so yeah, that looks pretty good. I think that looks like pretty much her whole jacket is outlined. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to come right over here, this same drop down menu that we used before, click on that, and we're going to choose solid color this time. Now you'll see that that just turned her whole jacket one solid color. Let's say I wanted to do it like this kind of teal, I don't know, whatever this greenish color is. So I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to push OK. It's very obvious where I've missed, but that's not a big deal. Now, with that green box selected, we're going to come back to this drop down menu. Instead of using screen this time, that's not going to be useful to me this time. See how these all do different things? We're going to come all the way down here to the bottom to color. And that's going to bring back all of the detail in that jacket, all of the brightness, all of the contrast, all of the shadows, all that stuff. Okay? Now, if you look, we know how to use layer masks now. So this layer mask is hiding most of the color on this image. So I want to use the white to get in a little closer. We're going to get in a little closer. I'm going to use the white with that layer mask selected, and with a nice little brush, I am going to brush on. Why is that not working? Oh, it's at 11%. Okay, we're going to brush on that color. What we're actually doing is just revealing that color that's hidden behind that black mask. We're going to just bring that in, and we're going to come in here and just try to get any little parts that seem like they could use a little bit more help, and anything that we don't want it on, like her little fingers, we're going to use the black mask and hide that behind the black mask. Okay? Okay. Now, sorry, keep making that pop up. Now we can get in close to the edges. Because this color is not a really bold color, it's okay if it bleeds a little bit for me. You might want to be more particular about it, but I'm not super worried if it bleeds off just a smidge, because nobody's going to be zoomed in this close on this image as I am. So If it's not bugging me, I'm good with it. If it's bugging you, fix it. I'm just going to show you basic. Now, the stuff that we're not going to talk about right now is color theory. We're not really going to go into color correction. You can see there's a lot of color cast from that red jacket on her white dress, on her face, all things like that. That is correctable, but that gets kind of complicated and we're not going to get into it this time. Maybe I'll do another class on color theory one day, but for now, that's kind of an easy way to do it. Okay, now check this out. So if I come over to this green box and double click, then I can change that jacket to literally any color I want. So if I felt like that was not quite right and I wanted it, instead of this one, let's say I wanted it more of like a purple. Let's say I wanted it more like a color to kind of match the trees. Let's say I wanted to match the wagon, but I wanted it a little more muted than her jacket was. Or maybe I want it nice and bright blue because I want it to like really contrast with those other, with the yellow and the red in the photo. That is how you're going to do that. You can change the color as long as that layer is there. You can double click on that at any time and change that color. So that is it, you guys. I hope that was super helpful. Again, like I said before, I'm so sorry that the Q&A didn't record. Oh, I'm so frustrated about it. My computer froze right there at the end and I wasn't able to recover it. We spent like 3 hours last night trying to get it to recover and it wouldn't work. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, text, email, DM, whatever is good for you. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned a ton and I will talk to you later. Bye.